For decades, Saudi Arabia was a kingdom built on stability. While revolutions shook neighboring countries and political upheavals transformed entire regions, the Saudi monarchy remained remarkably steady. Oil wealth fueled economic growth, traditional institutions maintained social order, and the royal family carefully balanced power within the kingdom. To many observers, Saudi Arabia appeared resistant to the dramatic changes sweeping across the modern world. The system had worked for generations, and few expected it to change anytime soon. Yet beneath this image of stability, a new reality was beginning to emerge. The world was changing faster than ever before. Technology was reshaping economies, global competition was intensifying, and questions about the future of oil were becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Saudi Arabia's prosperity had been built on energy exports. But what would happen if the foundations of that prosperity began to shift? It was a question that concerned economists, policymakers, and eventually one ambitious prince who believed the kingdom could not afford to wait for the future to arrive. That prince was Mohammed bin Salman. Unlike many leaders who preferred gradual reform, he believed that Saudi Arabia needed bold action. As his influence within the royal family expanded, so did the scale of his ambitions. He envisioned a kingdom that was economically diversified, technologically advanced, and globally competitive. He wanted Saudi Arabia to become more than an oil giant. He wanted it to become a leading power of the 21st century. It was a vision that inspired excitement among supporters and concern among critics. When Mohammed bin Salman began shaping Saudi Arabia's future, he inherited a nation blessed with immense wealth, but facing growing uncertainty. For decades, oil had been the lifeblood of the Saudi economy. It financed ambitious development projects, funded government services, and helped transform a desert kingdom into one of the most influential countries in the world. The kingdom's energy resources had generated extraordinary prosperity, but they had also created a deep dependence on a single source of income. As global markets evolved, that dependence became increasingly concerning. Advances in renewable energy, technological innovation, and changing environmental priorities raised questions about the long-term future of oil. Although Saudi Arabia remained one of the world's leading energy producers, many experts warned that relying exclusively on petroleum revenues could become a strategic vulnerability. The kingdom needed to prepare for a future that might look very different from its past. At the same time, demographic pressures were mounting. Saudi Arabia had a young and rapidly growing population. Millions of young citizens were entering adulthood with aspirations for careers, entrepreneurship, and economic opportunity. Meeting those expectations would require the creation of new industries and millions of jobs. The traditional economic model that had sustained previous generations might not be sufficient for the generations to come. The need for change was becoming impossible to ignore. In 2016, Mohammed bin Salman unveiled what would become the defining project of his political career, Vision 2030. More than an economic plan, it was a declaration that Saudi Arabia intended to reinvent itself. For decades, the kingdom's prosperity had depended almost entirely on oil revenues. The young crown prince believed that model could not guarantee long-term success in a rapidly changing world. If Saudi Arabia wanted to remain powerful in the 21st century, it needed to transform before circumstances forced it to. The vision was breathtaking in its scale. It called for the creation of new industries, the expansion of private enterprise, and the attraction of foreign investment on an unprecedented level. Technology, tourism, entertainment, and renewable energy would become pillars of a new economy. The kingdom would no longer define itself solely through oil. Instead, it would compete with the world's leading economies across multiple sectors. It was a bold promise, one that inspired excitement among supporters and skepticism among critics. Around the world, investors and governments watched closely. Some saw enormous opportunities in a nation determined to modernize. Others questioned whether such dramatic reforms could succeed in a society deeply rooted in tradition. Yet Mohammed bin Salman remained confident. He understood that history rarely rewards hesitation. The kingdom stood at a crossroads, and he intended to push it toward a future that few had imagined possible. Vision 2030 was no longer just a plan. It had become a national mission. Transforming an economy was one challenge. Transforming a society was another. For generations, Saudi Arabia had been known as one of the most conservative nations in the world. Social customs and cultural expectations shaped daily life, creating a system that many believed would remain unchanged for decades. Mohammed bin Salman, however, believed that modernization required more than economic reform. It required social change as well. One by one, barriers that had defined Saudi society began to fall. Entertainment venues reopened. International concerts arrived in the kingdom. Sporting events attracted global audiences. Most significantly, women gained greater opportunities and freedoms, becoming more visible in public life and the workforce. To many young Saudis, these changes represented the beginning of a new era. A generation that had grown up connected to the world through technology suddenly saw possibilities that had once seemed out of reach. Yet every reform carried risks. Traditionalists worried that rapid modernization could weaken the cultural and religious foundations of Saudi society. Heated debates emerged over the pace and direction of change. Supporters argued that reform was necessary for national progress. Critics feared that the kingdom was moving too quickly. As these competing visions collided, Mohammed bin Salman pressed ahead. He believed that the future belonged to those willing to embrace it, even when doing so meant challenging long-established norms.